It's amazing how it's changed. I mean, we talk about culture, and we're seeing it right now in Toronto, right? Toronto FC, we keep hearing this word culture and the toxicity in that room right now. This is John Herdman's first official week on the job. It started officially on Sunday. It's a big jump for John Herdman. He's announced his squad, his staff. No surprises there. Terry Dunfield is still there as assistant coach, which is good, I think, the right thing there. Where does he start? This is week 1. Now, we don't know whether Terry will remain on the sidelines for the next 3 games or whether John will be there. We don't know that situation. What do you think should happen? 3 games left in the season. I mean, from being on the sidelines, there isn't much you can accomplish.
No. I mean, first of all, it's a stranger situation when you have a club that's struggling and they're in the bottom 2, you hire a new coach and then he doesn't show up for a month. That's very unusual in football. I mean, around the world, if you get hired as a coach in the bottom 3 and you have the threat of relegation, that changes everything. That manager is there the next day to get things going. You need to save yourselves. And this position, in this scenario, you don't have that. So they're looking for an effect from John, obviously, otherwise they would have brought him in right away. And they've sort of, I think the management have given up on the team a long, long time ago, and that they decided, let's bring him in just near the end to try to make some sort of impact. At least it'll be interesting to see what happens in the games, because there has been this in a few of the games that we've seen, going even back to a few weeks ago or a week ago with Miami, that they're not closing down. They're not working hard enough for me. And I'm not sure if they're fit enough, what it is, but the one thing that you can do is, if you're losing, is put a shift in. And I think that that's where it's lost me, is that they're not putting a shift in at the level that I think they can. And when John comes in there in his first game, you're going to see them run and close down and everything like that. Well, what's that telling you about how they've been playing in the last 5-6 weeks under Terry? I think it's disrespectful. So I think that'll be first and foremost. He'll want an attitude change in the dressing room, change that culture right away, and hopefully he'll put a dent in it before the end of the season to get him set up for next season and get off the gates and start the season off well.
Yeah, I think he's looking at this squad right now, sitting from afar, watching the games. Obviously, he's got a great relationship with Terry Dunfield. So he'll be finding out what's going on in that dressing room, who's the bad apples, who are the good guys. And then I think he'll get through these 3 games, and then strategically he's got to get rid of a lot of players. He'll be looking at what players are out of contract, who can I shift and move on, what players can we get in, who's available to make this squad stronger. But I can see a big change in that dressing room, because you can't keep that right now and all of a sudden magical. It's going to be wonderful and roses next season.
What's your first day look like? You're going to walk into Herdman's position. You're a gaffer. What's your first day look like?
My first day, the one big thing for me is I'd want to sit down with a lot of the players and have a conversation with them, get to know who they are, what's been going on, what's been the issues, why are you not performing. And I think over the next couple of days, that's going to be a big role for him, is really find out who these guys are as individuals. Mm-hmm. And then he'll start making his assessments on everybody of, this guy's not right for me, this guy's honest, he's telling me the truth, I want to keep him because I believe in him. So he's got a lot of work to do.
Has he not been in the door, like, speaking to people at all, or is he...
He must have been.
I don't know.
Like, the question from the outside must be, with this massive signing of John Herdman, is he keeping a way to relieve accountability from himself? Because if he comes in a month ago and he does, like Craig's saying, change things a little bit earlier, they're only like 7 points outside of playoffs.
But is it to remove accountability or just I want a clean sheet? Because we were talking on the podcast last week, he couldn't ask for a better situation. Coming in with, especially with, I mean, we were going to talk about Insigne at some point, with the locker room, the media, the marketing, the communications all kind of falling apart right now. This is kind of where you want to come in.
Well,
right?
I wonder, though, if the initial hire, announced when it was more of a PR move on TFC's part.
100%.
Right? There was nothing positive at that point.
Yeah.
It was like, this is going down a black hole, this club. So to announce John Herdman gets the conversation, the tone changing. Okay, there's hope. We're bringing a big name in. And yeah, it's not for another month. And let's be honest, we won't see the effects until next season. But to me, that's why it was announced then. He'd made up his mind. It wasn't a future at Canada Soccer for whatever reason. And the timing kind of worked out. Yeah, let's announce it now. change the narrative, and then I'll come in at the end, sit in a press conference, speak to some media, learn a bit about this team, Craig, because listen, he knows Terry well. He knows that club. He knows who the bad seeds are at this point, you would think, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Yeah. And he makes a very good point. Like they weren't that many points out of playoffs. I mean, my goodness, 18 teams make the playoffs. So that clearly tells me that the management has given up on the team and that they've got no shot, because why wouldn't they bring him in earlier to try to, salvage something from the season? But they've obviously decided not to. And yeah, he's got a lot to figure out. But when you look at Toronto FC and all the leagues, say the top 20 leagues in the world, with the money that they spend at the top of the MLS table, this is one of the worst scenarios and probably one of the worst teams you could possibly have with all the resources that they have. The other team down there is Colorado. They don't spend anything. I get that, but I don't get the Toronto SC thing. So under all the circumstances over the last few years, this will be 3 years in a row they finish in the bottom two, spending a ton of money and not being successful. That's something that we don't really think about much, but it's atrocious. It really, really has been.
I can imagine Colorado saying, yeah, we stink, but we haven't spent a dime.
Yeah. Yeah. Precisely. There's a reason why we stink.
Yeah.
We've got a plan, maybe a strategy to build slowly. You can't change 20 players, right? And there's some kids there who have had decent seasons, who have learned. There's some talent there. Jonathan Osorio's going nowhere, scored 2 goals in the weekend. Latif Blessing's a good player, right? There is something there, but how do you change the culture of a room without making significant changes? It's not just the new manager coming in, is it?
Well, yeah, I mean, he's going to be the man. He's the guy that's got to set the tone. He's the guy that's got to bring the culture into this club. It's a wounded animal right now, big time. And he's got to figure out, how am I going to get the best out of these players right now? They are rock bottom. And the worst that I feel for is the young players, because the young players that they've used. Now, you're supposed to nurture them and you give them a couple of games here and there. They've rode them so long because they've had so many injuries, and they've been set up to fail.
Right.
And those are the players that you have to go back and get a hold of now and start nurturing them again, get your arm around them and get them to love the game more or less again, because what they've been involved in and what they've seen should not be what a young player sees. It shouldn't be at all.
It's interesting. Yesterday, Footy Prime's social media manager reached out and said, the John Herdman era begins today at TFC Live. So what do you expect to see happen over the offseason, and what do you expect to see next season? Big opinions only, please. Steve Kendersky, I hope I'm saying that, Kendrisky, big to me, keep the Italians and young talent and build around them, essentially what Herdman did with Canada. Is there any truth to that? Can you do that? You were just talking about young players. Is that off the table? The Italians have to go, almost. Are we exporting them back?
To be honest, and I know it's going to upset some portions of Toronto and Woodbridge and everything, for me, they've got to go. I think they're supposed to be leaders going out and winning games, and for the games I have watched, they've pretty much been passengers. And for what you're paying them, which is extortionate, okay, they're quality players at the time, especially when you brought them in, but for me, they're not having the effect they need, and I think the sooner they go, the better.
Yeah, I agree, and I think if you look at what they're paying them, if you can move them on, take that money, imagine the squad that you could build as well, the players you could get. I mean, you spend a fortune on 2 wide players, but you don't have a number 9 that can score goals. And I think they've really got to step back, have a look at the big picture and think, okay, if we can move this player on, free up some cash, who is our number 9 going to be? We need another central midfielder or a number 10 who can be creative and get in these areas and pull other players into play. But to spend that much money on two wide players seems an awful lot, especially when they're not performing. And where the club is today, I think it probably is right to move them on.
But where do you move them to, Jimmy? They're making so much money. There's very few places.
Yeah, you might have to eat some salary, for sure. You probably definitely 100% will have to eat some of that.
This is where you really want the Saudi Premier League to be successful.
Yes.
Come in for one of these guys, right? But they have to want to go there as well. And maybe they don't. Maybe they're not just mercenaries. They'll be in Saudi Arabia by next season. No, but I mean, it's a good point, though. It's not easy to move those contracts. You've got to eat money, but we see this ownership, MLSE, eating money all the time. They paid Mike Babcock, 5 years of salaries not to coach the team, right? So there's money there. Have they been burnt, though? That's the question. Are they saying enough of this? We're just bleeding money here. We're going to find out. But yeah, big job for John Herdman. It's going to be a fascinating a few months.